In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a single glass of brandy holds a deadly secret. Sir Reginald Ashburn is dead, poisoned in a locked study, with no trace of an intruder. Was it greed, betrayal, or a hidden debt that drove someone to murder? Enter Hercule Poirot, whose little grey cells unravel a web of lies, cigarette stubs, tampered clocks, and a forged will that could tear a family apart. Who among the elegant Lady Evelyn, reckless Charles, secretive Clara, or cunning Mrs. Langley, holds the key to the truth? In Forged Will Fury, Miss Marple's inheritance Inferno, every clue counts, and no secret stays buried. Will you guess the killer before Poirot reveals all? Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ashwood Manor. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over Ashwood Manor, its honey-colored stone walls standing resolute against the crisp October air. Nestled in the rolling hills of Dorset, the estate was a picture of timeless elegance, with ivy climbing its gables and mullioned windows glinting like watchful eyes. Yet beneath its serene facade, a quiet tension simmered, as if the manor itself sensed the storm brewing among its guests. Miss Jane Marple, invited by her old friend Lady Beatrice Harrow, arrived by taxi from the village of St. Mary Mead, her modest suitcase tucked beside her. Her sharp eyes, framed by a simple woolen hat, took in the scene as she stepped onto the gravel drive, the manicured lawns, the distant murmur of a fountain, and the faint clink of teacups from the terrace where the household had gathered. Lady Beatrice had written of a family matter requiring Miss Marple's discreet insight, and though the details were vague, the urgency in her friend's letter had piqued her curiosity. "Jane, my dear," Lady Beatrice emerged from the manor's oak doors, her silver hair impeccably styled, her smile warm but strained. "You've come just in time. The family is, well, you'll see. Come, let's join the others." The terrace was a tableau of polite unease. Sir Reginald Ashwood, the manor's patriarch, sat at the head of a wrought iron table, his weathered face etched with irritation. A widower in his late 60s, he was known for his vast fortune, built on shipping and shrewd investments, and his iron grip on the family's affairs. Beside him sat his daughter, Margaret Ashwood, a sharp-featured woman of 40, her eyes darting nervously as she stirred her tea. Across from her was her younger brother, Charles Ashwood, a handsome man in his 30s with a careless charm, his fingers drumming restlessly on the table. Their cousin, Evelyn Trent, a poised woman with auburn hair and a guarded smile, sipped her tea in silence, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The final guest was Dr. Lionel Hayes, the family physician, a weary man with spectacles and a habit of clearing his throat, who seemed to hover on the edge of the group. "Miss Marple," Sir Reginald said, his voice gruff but courteous as he rose to greet her. "Beatrice speaks highly of you. I trust you'll find Ashwood to your liking, though I warn you, we're a fractious lot today." Miss Marple's smile was serene, but her eyes missed nothing: the way Margaret's hand trembled, Charles's forced grin, Evelyn's careful poise, and Dr. Hayes's fidgeting fingers. "I'm sure it's a lovely gathering," she said, settling into a chair. "Lady Beatrice mentioned a family matter. I hope I may be of some small assistance." Lady Beatrice hesitated, glancing at Sir Reginald, who nodded curtly. "It's the will," she said, her voice low. "Reginald has decided to revise his testament, and it's caused, well, a stir. He's gathered us to discuss it. But there's been some unpleasantness." "Unpleasantness?" Charles laughed, though it sounded hollow. "That's putting it mildly, Beatrice. Father's decided to play king, rewriting our futures on a whim. Isn't that right, Margaret?" Margaret's lips tightened, and she set her teacup down with a clink. Don't be crude, Charles. Father has every right to do as he pleases. But it's unsettling, especially after all we've done for the estate. Evelyn's voice was smooth, almost too smooth. Let's not air our grievances before a guest. Miss Marple, I'm sure you'd rather enjoy the gardens than hear our squabbles. Oh, I find human nature far more interesting than gardens, Miss Marple said, her tone mild but her eyes gleaming. In my village, St. Mary Mead, I've observed that family matters often reveal the most unexpected insights. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat, his spectacles glinting. Quite right, Miss Marple. Families are complex. But Sir Reginald is in fine health. There's no rush to settle these things. Surely, Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. Health or no, Hayes, I want my affairs in order. Too many vultures circling, waiting for their share. Tonight, after dinner, I'll announce the new terms of my will. No arguments. The table fell silent, the clink of teacups replaced by an uneasy hush. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the manor's windows, where the curtains stirred faintly, as if someone had been watching. She noted the time 4 o'clock precisely and the way each guest avoided the other's eyes. Margaret's fingers twisted her napkin. Charles lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. Evelyn's smile was fixed, like a mask, and Dr. Hayes adjusted his spectacles unnecessarily. As the group dispersed to prepare for dinner, Lady Beatrice lingered, her voice low. Jane, there's more to this than Reginald's will. I overheard an argument last night, Margaret and Charles, in the library, speaking of debts and promises. And this morning, I found a note slipped under my door. The inheritance will burn before it's claimed. It's unsigned, but it frightened me. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened, though her expression remained serene. A note, you say? Most curious. Keep it safe, Beatrice. It may be a thread in a larger tapestry. As they walked toward the manor, Miss Marple's mind was already at work, cataloging the tensions, the glances, the unspoken fears. Ashwood Manor was a closed circle, its inhabitants bound by greed, loyalty, or secrets, and though no crime had yet been committed, she felt the weight of impending trouble, as surely as the fog rolling in from the hills. My dear Beatrice, she said softly, in my experience, a family gathered for a will is like a storm waiting to break. We must watch closely, for the first lightning strike is never far off. Chapter 2. The shadow-false dining room of Ashwood Manor gleamed under the soft glow of a crystal chandelier, its long oak table set with silver and fine china that reflected the wealth of Sir Reginald Ashwood. Yet, as the clock struck 8, the atmosphere was anything but festive. The guests gathered for dinner, their faces taut with the unspoken strain of the afternoon's conversation about the will. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly at one end, her simple black dress and neat shawl a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Her sharp eyes, hidden behind a serene smile, missed nothing, the flicker of unease in every glance, the weight of words left unsaid. Sir Reginald presided at the head of the table, his weathered hands gripping a glass of claret, his voice gruff as he addressed the group. Tonight, he declared, I'll lay out the new terms of my will. No more bickering, no more whispers. You'll know where you stand, and that's final. Margaret Ashwood, seated to his right, stiffened, her fork pausing mid-air. Father, must we do this now? It's unseemly, with a guest present. Her eyes flicked toward Miss Marple, who sipped her soup with apparent disinterest. Unseemly. Charles Ashwood, lounging to Sir Reginald's left, let out a dry laugh. What's unseemly is how you've been hovering over father's accounts, Margaret. Worried your shares shrinking. Margaret's cheeks flushed, and she set her fork down with a clink. Don't be absurd, Charles. I've managed the estate's books for years. If anyone's reckless, it's you, with your gambling debts. Evelyn Trent, seated beside Charles, interjected with a smooth smile. Please, let's not spoil dinner. Sir Reginald, I'm sure your decision is fair. You've always been just. Her auburn hair gleamed, but her eyes were guarded, as if measuring the room. Dr. Lionel Hayes cleared his throat, his spectacles glinting in the candlelight. Quite right, Evelyn. No need for discord. Sir Reginald's health is robust. There's time to settle these matters calmly. Miss Marple noted the doctor's nervous tick, the way his fingers adjusted his glasses unnecessarily. She also observed the faint tremor in Sir Reginald's hand as he raised his glass, and the way Lady Beatrice, seated beside her, glanced anxiously toward the door. The note Beatrice had mentioned, the inheritance will burn before it's claimed, weighed heavily on Miss Marple's mind, its cryptic threat a shadow over the gathering. Dinner proceeded with strained civility, the clatter of cutlery filling the silences. As the main course was cleared, Sir Reginald pushed back his chair and stood, his face set with determination. Enough stalling. Follow me to the library. It's time. The group rose, their movements reluctant, and followed Sir Reginald down a corridor lined with ancestral portraits, their stern gazes seeming to watch the procession. The library was a grand room, its walls lined with leather-bound books and a massive fireplace casting a warm glow. A heavy oak desk dominated the center, a sealed envelope resting on its polished surface, marked Last Will and Testament. Sir Reginald stood by the desk, his voice steady but cold. This is the new will, drafted this week. My solicitor arrives tomorrow to notarize it. I've made changes, significant ones. Some of you will be pleased, others less so. But it's my decision, and I stand by it. Margaret's voice was sharp. Father, why the secrecy? Surely, we deserve to know. You'll know soon enough. Sir Reginald snapped. After dinner, I'll read the terms aloud. For now, I want no arguments. Charles lit a cigarette, his hands unsteady. Playing the tyrant, father? Or is this your way of punishing us for not living up to your standards? Evelyn placed a hand on Charles's arm, her tone soothing. Charles, don't. Let's hear him out. Dr. Hayes hovered near the fireplace, his eyes on the envelope. A wise man plans for the future. Sir Reginald, I'm sure you've considered all angles. Miss Marple, standing quietly by a bookshelf, noted the tension in their voices, the way each avoided the other's eyes. She also noticed a faint scratch on the desk's lock, as if it had been tampered with, and a single ash from Charles's cigarette on the rug, out of place in the otherwise immaculate room. As the group returned to the dining room for dessert, a piercing scream shattered the silence. Lady Beatrice clutched Miss Marple's arm, her face ashen. It came from the library. They rushed back, the others close behind. The library door stood ajar, and inside, a horrifying sight awaited. Sir Reginald lay slumped over the desk, a letter opener buried in his chest, blood pooling on the polished wood. The envelope containing the will was gone. The fireplace roared, its flames consuming a few scattered papers, their edges curling to ash. Margaret gasped, clutching the door frame. Charles swore under his breath, his cigarette dropping to the floor. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her poise shattered. Dr. Hayes hurried forward, checking Sir Reginald's pulse, then shook his head. He's dead. Stabbed, by the look of it. No more than a minute ago. Miss Marple's eyes swept the room, noting the open window, the faint breeze stirring the curtains, and the absence of the envelope. She knelt by the desk, her fingers brushing the scratch on the lock. Now more significant in light of the crime. Most curious, she murmured. The will is gone. And yet the killer had no time to flee far. Lady Beatrice's voice trembled. Jane, who could have done this? We were all together. Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her mind already cataloguing details: the ash, the scratch, the missing will, the open window. My dear Beatrice, she said softly, in a house like this, no one is ever truly together. We must send for the police, but first, let us preserve this room exactly as it is. As Dr. Hayes covered Sir Reginald's body with a shawl, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the note Beatrice had found, its warning now chillingly fulfilled. The inheritance will burn before it's claimed. The storm she had sensed had broken, and in its wake lay a murder that would test her keenest instincts. Chapter 3. The rival of Inquiry's library of Ashwood Manor was now a scene of grim stillness, the air heavy with the scent of blood and charred paper. Sir Reginald Ashwood lay motionless beneath the shawl, the letter opener in his chest, a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the evening, the missing will, the scattered ashes in the fireplace, and the open window hinted at a crime both calculated and desperate. Miss Jane Marple stood near the desk, her serene demeanor belying the sharp focus of her mind as she absorbed every detail: the scratch on the desk's lock, the cigarette ash on the rug, the faint smudge of ink on Sir Reginald's fingers. Lady Beatrice, pale and trembling, clung to Miss Marple's arm. Jane, this is dreadful. Who could have done such a thing? We were all in the dining room. How could anyone slip away? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. My dear Beatrice, in a house full of secrets, a moment is all it takes. We must wait for the police. But first, let us ensure nothing is disturbed. The other residents hovered near the library door, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Margaret Ashwood's hands twisted her napkin, her sharp features drawn with grief or perhaps fear. Charles Ashwood lit another cigarette, his hands unsteady, his careless charm replaced by a wary tension. Evelyn Trent, her auburn hair slightly disheveled, maintained her poise but avoided meeting anyone's gaze. Dr. Lionel Hayes, his spectacles fogging slightly, muttered about the need for calm, though his own voice quavered. The local police arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Gerald Thorne, a stout man with a bristling mustache and a no-nonsense air. He surveyed the scene with a practiced eye, his notebook already open. A nasty business, he said, glancing at the body. Stabbed, and the will gone. Looks like a clear motive. Who was in the house when this happened? Lady Beatrice stepped forward, her voice unsteady but clear. We were all at dinner. Sir Reginald, his children Margaret and Charles, their cousin Evelyn, Dr. Hayes, Miss Marple, and myself. Sir Reginald led us to the library to discuss his will. Then we returned to the dining room. Moments later, we heard a scream and found him. Like this? Thorne's eyes narrowed. Altogether, you say? No one left the dining room. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Charles spoke first, his tone defensive. We were all there, Inspector. I stepped out briefly to fetch a lighter from my room. 5 minutes, no more. I was back before the scream. Margaret's voice was sharp. 5 minutes, Charles? Long enough to cause trouble. If you ask me, you were always resentful about father's money. Charles's face reddened. That's rich, coming from you, Margaret. You've been managing his accounts, plenty of chances to meddle there. Evelyn's voice cut through, smooth but strained. Please, this is no time for accusations. I was in the dining room the whole time, as was Dr. Hayes. We heard nothing until the scream. Dr. Hayes nodded, adjusting his spectacles. Quite right. I was seated next to Evelyn. Sir Reginald seemed in good spirits, if a bit tense. This is unthinkable. Inspector Thorne scribbled in his notebook, then turned to Miss Marple, who had been quietly observing. And you, Miss Marple, is it? You're a guest here. Did you notice anything unusual? Miss Marple's smile was mild, but her eyes were keen. I am merely a visitor, Inspector, invited by Lady Beatrice, but I did notice a few small things: a scratch on the desk's lock, a cigarette ash on the rug, and the window open. Though the night is chilly, and, of course, the will is missing, which is most suggestive. Thorne's mustache twitched. Suggestive, eh? You sound like you've seen a crime or two. Very well. We'll seal the library and take statements. No one leaves the manor until we've searched every room. As the police began their work, cordoning off the library and ushering the residents to the drawing room, Miss Marple lingered, her gaze lingering on the fireplace. The ashes were few, but one fragment bore a faint trace of handwriting. To charred. To read. She thought of the note Lady Beatrice had found. The inheritance will burn before it's claimed, and wondered if the will had met a similar fate in the drawing room. The residents sat in strained silence, watched by a young constable. Lady Beatrice whispered to Miss Marple, "Jane, you don't think one of them?" "Surely not." Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. "In my experience, Beatrice, a family gathered for a will is like a flock of birds. One sudden move, and they scatter, revealing what lies beneath. We must watch and listen." She noted the time, 9:30 precisely, and the way each resident reacted to the police's presence. Margaret's fingers knotted her napkin until it tore. Charles smoked furiously, his eyes darting to the door. Evelyn's hands were still, but her lips moved slightly, as if rehearsing a response. Dr. Hayes adjusted his spectacles repeatedly, his face pale. Each had a motive. Miss Marple mused: Margaret's control of the estate, Charles's debts, Evelyn's ambition, Dr. Hayes's proximity to Sir Reginald's health. And the missing will was the key. Its absence a deliberate act. Inspector Thorne returned, his expression grim. "We found something in the garden, near the open window, a handkerchief, monogrammed with R.A. and stained with blood. Looks like the killer dropped it in their haste." Margaret gasped. "Father's handkerchief? But he always kept it in his pocket." Charles's voice was sharp. "Or someone took it to make it look like he was attacked outside. Clever, if you ask me." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, Mr. Ashwood, a handkerchief is easily dropped or placed. Inspector, was it near the window, or further out?" Thorne frowned. "Just under the window, half hidden in the shrubs." "Why?" "Because," Miss Marple said, "a killer fleeing would not pause to drop something so incriminating. It suggests intention." Thorne's brow furrowed, but he nodded. "We'll keep that in mind. Now, I'll need your statements, one by one. Miss Marple, you first." As she followed the inspector to a side room, Miss Marple's mind was already weaving the clues together: the scratch, the ash, the handkerchief, the note. The murder of Sir Reginald was no random act. It was a thread in a tapestry of greed and betrayal. And in Ashwood Manor, she knew, the truth would reveal itself through the smallest details, if only one observed closely enough. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting long shadows across the polished oak floor. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint, lingering trace of cigar smoke from the previous evening. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed armchair, his small, immaculate figure a study in precision. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache was perfectly symmetrical, and his green eyes glinted with quiet intensity. Before him, arranged in a semicircle on various sofas and chairs, were the inhabitants of the manor, their faces a gallery of unease. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, his notebook open, his pencil poised. He had already sketched a rough timeline of the previous evening's events, based on the statements given to Inspector Japp. The inspector himself, a sturdy man with a bulldog-like demeanor, paced near the window, occasionally glancing at Poirot, with a mixture of impatience and grudging respect. "Now, Miss Amos," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "we must proceed with order and method. The death of Sir Reginald Ashburn is no mere accident of fate. It is a puzzle, and every puzzle has its pieces. I, Hercule Poirot, will find them. Let us begin with the facts." He turned his gaze to Lady Evelyn Ashburn, who sat rigid on a velvet settee, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her morning dress, though elegant, seemed to weigh heavily on her frail shoulders. "Madam, you were the last to see Sir Reginald alive." Nest's pause. "You said you spoke with him in his study at precisely 10:15 last night. What was the nature of this conversation?" Lady Evelyn's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "It was a private matter, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald and I discussed family affairs. Nothing of consequence." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Nothing of consequence, you say? Yet, within the hour, your husband was dead, poisoned by a substance as yet unidentified. You will forgive me, madam, if I find this nothing most intriguing. Tell me, what was his mood?" "He was agitated," she admitted, her fingers tightening. "He had been under strain, with the estate's finances and other matters." "Other matters?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his gaze was unrelenting. "Perhaps the matter of his will, or the codicil he mentioned to his solicitor only yesterday." A murmur rippled through the room. Charles Ashburn, Sir Reginald's nephew, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his handsome face clouded. Beside him, Miss Clara Fenton, the governess, kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands folded demurely. Dr. Mortimer Blake, the family physician, coughed and adjusted his spectacles, while Mrs. Beatrice Langley, Sir Reginald's sister-in-law, clutched her handkerchief with a fierceness that belied her composed exterior. Lady Evelyn hesitated, then said, "He did not mention the codicil to me. He only spoke of his concerns for the estate. He feared ruin." Poirot nodded, as if this were precisely what he expected. "Merci, madam. We will return to you." He turned to Charles. "Monsieur Ashburn, you were in the billiard room with Dr. Blake until 10:30, correct? And then you retired to your room." Charles nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, I was with Mortimer Dr. Blake until then. We played a few frames, had a drink. I went upstairs afterward." "And you heard nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "No cries, no footsteps, no sounds from the study below your room?" "Nothing," Charles said firmly, though his eyes flickered toward Clara for a fraction of a second. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Very well. And you, Mademoiselle Fenton? You were in the nursery with young Master Thomas until 10 o'clock, when you put him to bed." Then you went to your room, which is adjacent to the nursery. Correct. Clara's voice was soft but clear. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I read for a while, then went to bed. And you, too, heard nothing. Poirot's tone was almost conversational, but his eyes missed nothing. Nothing, Clara replied, her gaze steady but her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Poirot turned to Dr. Blake. Monsieur le Docteur, you remained in the billiard room after Monsieur Charles left. Alone? Dr. Blake nodded, his face pale. I stayed to finish my cigar. I left around 10:45 and went to my room. And you passed the study door on your way? Poirot asked. Yes, but it was closed. I heard nothing. Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. Curious, is it not, that so many of you were so near, yet heard nothing? A man dies, poisoned, in a room not 20 feet from where some of you stood, and yet silence. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Let us turn to the timeline. Inspector Japp, if you please. Japp cleared his throat, flipping open his notebook. Right? Sir Reginald was last seen alive by Lady Evelyn at 10:15. The butler, Mr. Grayson, found him dead at 11 o'clock, slumped over his desk. The study door was locked from the inside, and the key was in Sir Reginald's pocket. No signs of a struggle. The glass of brandy on his desk is being tested for poison, but the symptoms, convulsions, frothing at the mouth, suggest something. Fast-acting, like cyanide. Cyanide, Poirot mused, his eyes gleaming. A poison of precision. It requires access, opportunity, and intent. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, who prepared Sir Reginald's brandy? The butler, standing stiffly by the door, blinked. I did, sir, as I always do. I poured it from the decanter in the study at around 9:30, before Sir Reginald retired there. No one else touched it. And the decanter? Poirot asked. It's kept in the study, sir, locked in the cabinet. Only Sir Reginald and I have keys. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. And yet, someone found a way. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, did you notice anything unusual in the study last night? A smell, perhaps, or an object out of place? Grayson frowned, his brow furrowing. Well, there was a faint smell, sir, like almonds, but very slight. I thought it was the polish on the desk. Almonds, Poirot repeated, his voice almost a whisper. Most interesting. Hastings, scribbling furiously, looked up. Poirot, do you think the poison was in the brandy? Poirot raised a hand. Patience, mon ami. The little grey cells, they are working. We must consider all possibilities. The brandy, the glass, the decanter, the air itself, each is a piece of the puzzle. He turned to Mrs. Langley, who had been silent thus far. Madam, you were in the drawing room with Lady Evelyn until 10 o'clock, then retired to your room. Did you, perhaps, visit the study later? Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, her handkerchief fluttering. Certainly not. I went straight to bed. I had no reason to disturb Reginald. No reason, Poirot echoed, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. And yet, madam, I understand you and Sir Reginald had disagreements about the estate, perhaps, or the will. Her face flushed. That's preposterous. Reginald was my brother-in-law. We had our differences, but I would never. Enough. Ms. Amos, Poirot said, raising a hand. For now, we observe, we listen, we think. Each of you has a story, and each story has its cracks. I, Hercule Poirot, will find them. As the group dispersed, Hastings leaned close. Poirot, what do you make of it? They all seem so plausible. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Plausible. Hastings, that is the danger. The truth, it hides in the plausible, like a needle in the haystack. But fear not, the little gray cells, they are never deceived. He rose, adjusting his lapels, and cast a final glance around the room. Come, Hastings, let us examine the study once more. There is something that does not fit. As they left, Hastings noticed Clara Fenton lingering by the door, her eyes fixed on Poirot with an expression that was both fearful and curious. He made a mental note to mention it to Poirot later, for now the great detective's mind was already elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of a crime that was as intricate as it was deadly. Chapter 5. The Red Herring's library of Blackthorn Manor was a cavernous room, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy oak shelves that seemed to absorb the daylight. A faint mustiness clung to the air, mingling with the acrid tang of suspicion that now permeated the household. Hercule Poirot stood near a tall window, his small, neat figure silhouetted against the pale morning light. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted as if listening to the very walls for their secrets. Captain Hastings sat at a nearby table, his notebook open, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the alibis from the previous evening. Inspector Japp burst into the room, his face flushed with the self-assured energy of a man who believed he had cracked the case. Poirot, I've got it, he declared, brandishing a small vial he held gingerly with a handkerchief. Found this in Dr. Blake's medical bag, hidden in a false compartment. Cyanide, I'd wager. The lab's testing it now, but it's as good as a confession. Poirot turned slowly, his green eyes glinting with interest but no trace of surprise. Mon cher Japp, you are swift, as always. But tell me, this vial, where precisely was it found? In Blake's room, in his medical bag, like I said, Japp replied, his tone impatient. The man's a doctor, has access to poisons, and was in the billiard room near the study last night. He's our man, Poirot. Motive? Money, likely. Sir Reginald's will leaves a tidy sum to the family physician for his years of service. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. A tidy sum, you say? And yet, Inspector, you assume too quickly. The obvious suspect is rarely the correct one. Let us consider Dr. Blake with care. Bring him to me, s'il vous plaît. Moments later, Dr. Mortimer Blake entered, his face pale and his spectacles slightly askew. He carried himself with the weary dignity of a man accustomed to scrutiny, but his hands trembled as he adjusted his cuffs. Monsieur Poirot, this is absurd, he began, his voice strained. I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. He was my patient, my friend. Poirot gestured to a chair. Asseyez-vous, docteur. Tell me, this vial of cyanide, how did it come to be in your bag? I don't know, Blake exclaimed, his voice rising. I've never seen it before. I keep medicines. Yes, but nothing like that. Someone must have planted it. Planted? Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. A serious accusation, monsieur. And who, pray, would do such a thing? Blake hesitated, his gaze darting to the door. I can't say, but I swear, I had no part in this. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. You were in the billiard room until 10:45, alone after Monsieur Charles left. The study is but a few steps away. Did you, perhaps, visit Sir Reginald to discuss his health or his will? Blake's face reddened. I told you. I went straight to my room. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Rien du tout. Poirot pressed, his head tilted. Not even the faint smell of almonds. As Monsieur Grayson described. Blake froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I didn't notice any smell. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of calculation. Merci, docteur. You may go, for now. As Blake left, Hastings leaned close. Poirot, do you think he's lying? That Violet's damning evidence. Poirot raised a finger. Evidence. Hastings is like a mirror. It reflects what is placed before it, but it does not always show the truth. The vial is convenient to convenient. Let us consider another possibility. He crossed to the fireplace, where a small ormolu clock ticked steadily. The timeline, Hastings. It is our anchor. Sir Reginald was alive at 10:15, speaking with Lady Evelyn. Dead by 11 o'clock. When Grayson found him, the poison, cyanide, acts swiftly within minutes. Yet no one admits to entering the study after Lady Evelyn. The door was locked. The key in Sir Reginald's pocket. How, then, was the poison administered? Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. The brandy, perhaps. Grayson poured it at 9:30. But someone could have tampered with it later. Precisement, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. But who and how? The decanter was locked in the cabinet, and only Grayson and Sir Reginald had keys. Yet there's another detail. He paused, his gaze drifting to the window. The window in the study, Hastings. It was open when Grayson found the body, was it not? Yes, Hastings said, his eyes widening. But Japp said there were no signs of entry, no footprints, no disturbed furniture, no signs, Poirot murmured. And yet, the window was open. A small detail, but one that does not fit. Come, let us speak to Mademoiselle Fenton. There is something in her manner that intrigues me. They found Clara Fenton in the nursery, tidying a pile of children's books. Her movements were precise, but her eyes darted nervously as Poirot entered. Mademoiselle, he began, his tone gentle. You were in your room, adjacent to the nursery, after putting young Master Thomas to bed at 10 o'clock. You heard nothing unusual. Clara shook her head, her hands clutching a book. Nothing, monsieur. Poirot. It was a quiet night. And yet, Poirot said, stepping closer, your room is directly above the study. A scream, a thud. The sound of a glass falling, surely something would reach your ears? Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. I was reading. Perhaps I was too absorbed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Reading, mademoiselle, or perhaps listening. You see, I have observed you. Your hands, they tremble when we speak of the study. Your eyes, they avoid mine. What is it you fear to tell Hercule Poirot? Clara's breath caught, and for a moment, it seemed she might speak. But then she straightened, her voice firm. I have nothing to hide, monsieur. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well. But know this, mademoiselle. The truth. It cannot hide forever. The little gray cells, they see all. As they left the nursery, Hastings whispered, she's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see her hands? She was nervous. Oui, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. But nervous for herself, or for another? That is the question. And there is another matter, the codicil to Sir Reginald's will. Why has no one mentioned it, save the solicitor? We must speak to him again. They found Mr. Percival Reed, the solicitor, in the drawing room, reviewing papers with Lady Evelyn. Reed was a thin, bespectacled man with a perpetually worried expression. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot said, "this codicil, you mentioned it was drafted yesterday, but you did not share its contents. Tell me, what did Sir Reginald change?" Reed hesitated, glancing at Lady Evelyn, who nodded curtly. "It was a minor alteration," Reed said. "Sir Reginald wished to increase the inheritance for his nephew, Charles, and reduce the portion for another party." "Another party?" Poirot's voice was sharp. "Who, monsieur?" Reed swallowed. "Mrs. Beatrice Langley." Sir Reginald felt she had been overly influential in estate matters. A heavy silence fell. Lady Evelyn's face tightened, and Hastings scribbled furiously. Poirot, however, merely smiled. "Most interesting. And this codicil, where is it now?" "In my office, locked away," Reed said. "Sir Reginald signed it yesterday morning." "Then we must see it," Poirot said, "for if it is the key to this murder, it may unlock more than we expect." As they left the drawing room, Hastings murmured, "Poirot, this codicil, it gives Mrs. Langley a motive, and Dr. Blake with the cyanide. It's too much to be coincidence." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Coincidence, Hastings? Non. There's no coincidence in murder, only design. And I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it." The library seemed to grow colder as the day wore on, the shadows lengthening like the secrets that coiled within Blackthorn Manor. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details: almonds, windows, keys, and trembling hands, each a thread in the intricate tapestry of a crime that was far from solved. Chapter 6. A clue in detail. Late afternoon light cast a golden glow over Blackthorn Manor's gardens, where roses and hydrangeas bloomed in orderly rows, a stark contrast to the chaos within the house. Hercule Poirot stood in the study where Sir Reginald Ashburn had met his end, his small, precise figure dwarfed by the towering bookshelves and heavy mahogany desk. The room was untouched since the night of the murder, save for the removal of the brandy glass. Now at the police laboratory, the air held a faint, lingering bitterness, like almonds gone sour, a scent Poirot noted with interest. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his notebook open, his eyes scanning the room for anything amiss. "Poirot," he said, "the police have been over this place thoroughly. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. The window was open, but the ground outside showed no footprints. It's a locked room mystery, isn't it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a glimmer of amusement in his green eyes. "A locked room, Hastings. It appears so. But appearances, they deceive. The truth lies in the details, the small things that others overlook. Come, let us examine this room with the eyes of Hercule Poirot." He moved to the desk, his gloved hands hovering over the surface as if sensing its secrets. The decanter, still half full of amber liquid, sat in its locked cabinet, the glass door gleaming. Poirot peered at it, then turned his attention to the desk itself. A blotter, an inkstand, a few scattered papers, and a small silver cigarette case lay neatly arranged. He picked up the case, turning it over in his hands. "Curious," he murmured. "Sir Reginald did not smoke, did he, Hastings?" "No," Hastings replied, frowning. "Lady Evelyn said he despised the habit, thought it vulgar." "Precisement," Poirot said, opening the case. Inside were 3 cigarettes, their tips slightly yellowed, as if old. "And yet, here is a cigarette case, out of place in a non-smoker's study. Tell me, Hastings, who in this household smokes? Hastings thought for a moment. Charles Ashburn smokes. I've seen him with a cigarette. And Dr. Blake. Of course he had that cigar in the billiard room. Mrs. Langley might, but I'm not sure. Poirot nodded, closing the case with a soft click. A clue, Hastings. Small, but significant. Let us see where it leads. He moved to the window, which overlooked the gravel path below. The sash was still raised, the frame undisturbed. Poirot leaned out, his eyes scanning the sill. No marks, no scratches. The window was open from within, not forced. Yet why? Was it open on a cool autumn night? He turned back to the room, his gaze falling on a small brass ashtray tucked behind a stack of books on a side table. He lifted it, revealing a faint dusting of ash and a single cigarette stub, its end crushed. Mon Dieu, he said softly. Another piece of the puzzle. This stub bit is not the same brand as those in the case. See the paper, the color. Different. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Good Lord. Poirot, you're right. But what does it mean? Someone smoked in here after Sir Reginald died. Or before, Poirot said, his voice low. We must test this stub. The ash. The paper. They may tell us more than their owner intended. He placed the stub in a small envelope, tucking it into his pocket. But there's another detail. Hastings. The clock. He pointed to the mantel, where a heavy ormolu clock ticked steadily. Inspector Japp noted that it was 5 minutes slow when he arrived. Grayson confirmed it was accurate at 9:30 when he poured the brandy. What does this suggest? Hastings blinked. Someone tampered with it. To confuse the timeline, perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Or to create an alibi. 5 minutes is a small thing, but in a murder, 5 minutes can be everything. They were interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Japp, who entered with a grim expression. Poirot. The lab results are in. The brandy glass had traces of cyanide, but the decanter itself is clean. The poison was added to the glass after it was poured. Poirot's eyebrows rose. After it was poured. Most interesting. So, the poisoner had access to the glass between 9:30, when Grayson poured it, and 10:15, when Lady Evelyn left Sir Reginald, or perhaps later, if the glass was not drunk immediately. Japp nodded. Exactly. And I've got my eye on Dr. Blake. That vial in his bag, it's cyanide. No question. He's the only one with the means. Poirot raised a hand. Means. Yes, but motive. And opportunity. Let us not rush, mon cher Japp. There's more here than meets the eye. He turned to the door, where Clara Fenton stood, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. You have come to the study. Why? Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering to the cigarette case on the desk. I thought I might help. I heard you were examining the room. I didn't mean to intrude. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. You are not intruding, mademoiselle. But you are nervous. Tell me, do you recognize this cigarette case? Clara's breath caught, and for a moment, she seemed on the verge of speaking. Then she shook her head. No, Monsieur Poirot. I don't. Poirot watched her closely, noting the slight tremor in her hands. Very well. But if you remember anything at all, you will tell Hercule Poirot. Oui? She nodded and hurried out, leaving Hastings staring after her. She knows something, Poirot. That look, she recognized the case. Oui, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. But what she knows, and why she hides it, that is the question. Let us speak to Monsieur Charles. His cigarettes, they may hold the key. They found Charles Ashburn in the billiard room, idly rolling a cue ball across the green felt. His handsome face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. Monsieur Charles, Poirot began, holding up the cigarette case. This is yours? Nest's pause. Charles glanced at it, his expression guarded. Yes, it's mine. I must have left it in the study a few days ago. I was looking for it. A few days ago. Poirot's tone was skeptical. Yet it was on Sir Reginald's desk, in plain sight. And this stub, he produced the envelope. It is not from your case. Do you know whose it might be? Charles's jaw tightened. No idea. Plenty of people smoke here. Could be anyone's. Poirot smiled faintly. Anyone, you say? Yet not Sir Reginald. Tell me, monsieur, what did you and your uncle discuss in the study 2 nights ago? The servants heard raised voices. Charles flushed. It was nothing. A disagreement about the estate. He thought I was spending too freely. And the codicil? Poirot pressed. Did he mention increasing your inheritance? Charles's eyes widened, then narrowed. He didn't mention it. But if he did, I'd be grateful. I've debts to settle. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, though his eyes betrayed a deeper calculation. Merci, monsieur. We will speak again. As they left the billiard room, Hastings whispered, Poirot, that cigarette case, it's a clue, isn't it? And Clara's reaction, she's hiding something about it. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice a soft murmur. The case, the stub, the clock, the window, these are the threads of our tapestry. They seem separate, but they weave together. The little grey cells, they are beginning to see the pattern. The manor seemed to hum with secrets as the day drew to a close. Each clue a spark in the darkness of the mystery. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments, while the spectre of Sir Reginald's death loomed ever larger, its truth just out of reach. Chapter 7. Morley's surfacey dining room of Blackthorn Manor was a study in opulence, its long mahogany table gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. Yet, as the household gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was anything but warm. The clink of silverware and the murmur of strained conversation filled the air, punctuated by glances that darted like daggers. Hercule Poirot sat at one end, his small, immaculate figure a calm center amid the storm of suspicion. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, kept his notebook discreetly tucked beneath a napkin, his eyes flicking from face to face. Poirot's gaze moved methodically over the assembled company. Lady Evelyn, pale and composed, picking at her food. Charles Ashburn, his jaw tight, sipping wine with a forced air of nonchalance. Clara Fenton, her hands folded primly but her eyes restless. Dr. Mortimer Blake, adjusting his spectacles nervously, and Mrs. Beatrice Langley, whose sharp glances betrayed a simmering anger. The butler, Grayson, moved silently, serving with mechanical precision, his face a mask of professionalism. Ms. Amos, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Tonight we dine together, yet the shadow of Sir Reginald's death hangs over us. I have observed you all, and I have found inconsistencies. It is time we speak of them. A fork clattered against a plate. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Charles leaned back, his expression guarded. What inconsistencies, Monsieur Poirot? He asked, his tone clipped. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Let us begin with the cigarette case, Monsieur Charles. You say you left it in the study days ago, yet it was found on Sir Reginald's desk. polished and prominent. The night of his death. And the cigarette stub different from those in your case. Curious. Non? Charles's face flushed. I told you. It could be anyone's. I'm not the only one who smokes. Indeed, Poirot said, turning to Dr. Blake. And you, Doctor. You smoked a cigar in the billiard room that night. Yet you claim to have noticed no almond-like smell, despite being so near the study where cyanide was used. Your medical bag. It contained a vial of the very poison. A coincidence. Perhaps. Blake's hands trembled, his voice rising. I've said it before. Monsieur Poirot, that vial was planted. I had no reason to kill Sir Reginald. He was my friend, my patient. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Your friend, and yet, I have learned from Monsieur Reed that Sir Reginald intended to reduce your stipend in his will. A small matter, perhaps, but one that might sting a man of pride. A gasp escaped Clara Fenton, quickly stifled. All eyes turned to her, but she stared at her plate, her cheeks pale. Poirot's gaze lingered on her for a moment before shifting to Mrs. Langley. And you, Madame Langley, you were displeased with Sir Reginald's decision to alter his will, reducing your share in favor of Monsieur Charles. Did this not create bitterness? Mrs. Langley's eyes flashed, her handkerchief crumpling in her fist. How dare you, Monsieur Poirot? Reginald and I had our differences, but I would never stoop to murder. I loved my sister, his late first wife, and I stayed in this house for her memory, not for money. Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing but firm. Calm, madam. I do not accuse. I observe. And I have observed that this household is a web of secrets. Affairs of the heart, perhaps, or of the purse. His eyes flicked to Lady Evelyn, who stiffened. What are you implying, monsieur? She asked, her voice icy. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. Madam, you spoke of Sir Reginald's agitation the night he died. You mentioned family affairs, but I have learned from the servants that you and Sir Reginald argued frequently in recent weeks about money, about the estate, and about a certain letter found in his desk. Lady Evelyn's fork froze halfway to her mouth. A letter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know of no such letter. Raymond, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Then allow me to enlighten you. A letter, addressed to Sir Reginald, was found among his papers this afternoon. It spoke of a debt, a substantial one owed to a man in London, a man whose name, I believe, is known to you. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Hastings scribbled furiously, his heart pounding. Poirot, he whispered. How did you find this letter? Jap didn't mention it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The little grey cells, Hastings. They guide me to the places others overlook. The letter was tucked inside a ledger, hidden in plain sight. But its contents, they suggest a motive, do they not? Lady Evelyn's composure cracked, her hands trembling. It was a private matter, she said, her voice low. Reginald borrowed money years ago. Before we married, he was repaying it, slowly. It has nothing to do with his death. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. But secrets, madam, they breed suspicion. And in this house, there are many secrets. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Fenton, you have been very quiet. Yet I sense you know more than you say. The cigarette case, when I showed it to you, your eyes betrayed you. To whom does it truly belong? Clara's hands clenched, her voice barely audible. I told you. I don't know it. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was relentless. You are protecting someone, mademoiselle. But in a murder, loyalty can be a dangerous thing. Speak, and let the truth free you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't," she whispered, and fled the room. A murmur rippled through the diners. Charles slammed his glass down, his face dark. "Leave her alone, Poirot. She's just a governess, caught up in this mess." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Just a governess, monsieur. Or perhaps something more. I have observed the way you look at her, the way she avoids your gaze. There is a connection." "None." Charles's face reddened, but he said nothing. Mrs. Langley stood, her voice sharp. "This is intolerable. You accuse us all, Monsieur Poirot, yet you offer no proof. I demand you stop this. This inquisition." Poirot remained unruffled, his hands folded neatly. "Madam, the truth is not found by demands, but by patience. I will find it, with or without your cooperation." He rose, adjusting his lapels. "Bonsoir, Ms. Amos. Reflect on your secrets, for they will not remain hidden long." As the group dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the hall. "Good heavens, Poirot, you've stirred them up. That letter, do you think it's the key? And Clara, she's hiding something big." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The letter, the cigarette case, the codicil, these are threads, Hastings. But the true knot lies in the human heart. Clara Fenton, she is the key to something, though not, I think, the murder itself. We must watch her closely." Outside, the evening wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of autumn decay. Within Blackthorn Manor, the web of lies grew tighter, each secret a step closer to the truth or to disaster. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments, as the mystery deepened like the shadows that enveloped the house. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. Conservatory of Blackthorn Manor was a haven of glass and greenery, its air heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. Moonlight streamed through the panes, casting a silvery glow over the wicker furniture and the tiled floor. Hercule Poirot stood near a potted fern, his silhouette sharp against the glass, his hands clasped behind his back. The house was quiet now, the dinner's tensions lingering like a storm that had yet to break. Captain Hastings sat on a wicker chair, his notebook open, his face etched with concern. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "you pushed them hard tonight." Clara's reaction, she was on the verge of cracking. "Do you think she'll talk?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the moonlight, his voice soft but resolute. "Patience, mon ami. The heart, it speaks when the mind can no longer hold its secrets. Mademoiselle Fenton is close to that moment, but we must tread carefully, for the truth she hides may wound more than it heals." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft sob from the shadows. Poirot turned, his head tilted, and stepped toward the sound. There, half hidden behind a screen of climbing ivy, stood Clara Fenton, her face streaked with tears, her hands clutching a crumpled handkerchief. Her governess's composure was gone, replaced by a raw, trembling vulnerability. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, his tone like a caress, "you have come to the conservatory to weep alone. But you are not alone now. Speak, and let Hercule Poirot share your burden." Clara's breath hitched, her eyes darting between Poirot and Hastings. "I can't," she whispered. "It's too much. If I tell you, it will ruin everything." Poirot stepped closer, his voice steady but kind. "Ruin, mademoiselle, or redeem the truth. It is a heavy weight, but it is also a key. Tell me, what do you know of the cigarette case, of Sir Reginald's death?" Clara's hands shook, and she sank onto a nearby bench, her resolve crumbling. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice breaking. "The cigarette case. It's Charles's. Yes, but I took it. I took it from the study 2 days before Sir Reginald died." Hastings's eyes widened, his pencil poised. "You took it. Why, Miss Fenton?" Clara's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely audible. Because Charles and we've been close. Too close. Sir Reginald suspected something. He confronted me that night, 2 days before his death. He said I was a distraction to Charles, that I was unfit to be Thomas's governess. He threatened to dismiss me unless I ended things with Charles. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. "And the cigarette case, mademoiselle? Why take it?" "It was a foolish impulse," Clara said, tears spilling anew. "Charles left it in the study after their argument. I took it to protect him. I thought if Sir Reginald saw it, he'd know Charles had been there, shouting about the estate, the money. I didn't want him blamed for anything." Poirot nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And the night of the murder, you were in your room, above the study. Did you hear anything? A voice, a sound?" Clara hesitated, her hands twisting the handkerchief. I thought I heard something. A thud, perhaps, around 10:30. But I wasn't sure. I was reading, and the nursery is so quiet. I didn't dare go down to check." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "And the cigarette stub, mademoiselle? The one that does not match Charles's case?" Clara's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "I don't know anything about that. I swear it." Poirot studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been brave to speak, even this much. But I must ask one thing more. This letter, the one about Sir Reginald's debt, did you know of it?" Clara's breath caught, and she looked away. I heard him mention it once, to Lady Evelyn. He was angry, said it was a burden he couldn't shake. But I don't know the details." Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "Very well. Go now, mademoiselle. Rest. But know this, the truth. It will come, whether you speak it or not." As Clara hurried out, her footsteps echoing on the tiles, Hastings leaned close. "Good heavens, Poirot, she's in love with Charles. That explains her nervousness, her secrecy. But do you think she's telling the whole truth?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The whole truth, Hastings? Not yet. She has given us a piece of vital peace, but there are more. Her love for Charles. It clouds her judgment, but it also makes her a witness. The thud at 10:30, it narrows our timeline." Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. "But, Poirot, if the poison was in the brandy glass, and it was poured at 9:30, how does the thud fit? Cyanide acts quickly, doesn't it?" Poirot said, his voice low. "Which is why the thud is significant. It was not the moment of death, perhaps, but the moment of something else, a struggle, a fall, a deception. We must return to the study tomorrow, Hastings. There is a detail we have missed." As they left the conservatory, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its corridors dark and silent. But the silence was deceptive, for within its walls, secrets were unraveling. Clara's confession had cracked open a door, revealing a glimpse of the tangled emotions that bound the household: love, fear, and betrayal. Yet Poirot knew the true heart of the mystery lay deeper still, hidden in the subtle contradictions of human nature. He paused at the foot of the grand staircase, his eyes distant. The little gray cells, Hastings, he murmured. They whisper. To me now. The cigarette stub, the open window, the slowed clock, the letter, they are not separate. They are one. And soon, we will see the pattern. Hastings shivered, the weight of the case pressing on him. You're close, aren't you, Poirot? You're starting to see it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Close, mon ami. Perhaps. But the truth. It is like a star, it shines brightest when the night is darkest. We are not there yet. The moonlight faded as clouds drifted across the sky, and Blackthorn Manor settled into an uneasy sleep, its secrets coiled tightly, waiting for Poirot's relentless logic to unravel them. Chapter 9. The trap drawing room of Blackthorn Manor was steeped in an oppressive silence, broken only by the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, casting the room in a dim, amber glow from the lamps, as if the house itself sought to shield its secrets from the daylight. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space with an air of quiet authority. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly groomed, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a predator closing in on its prey. Around him, seated in a tense semicircle, were the suspects. Lady Evelyn Ashburn, her face pale but composed, Charles Ashburn, his jaw tight, a cigarette dangling unlit between his fingers. Clara Fenton, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. Dr. Mortimer Blake, fidgeting with his spectacles. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her lips pursed, her handkerchief clutched like a lifeline. And Mr. Percival Reed, the solicitor, whose nervous glances betrayed his discomfort. Inspector Japp stood near the door, arms crossed, his bulldog-like face set in a scowl. Captain Hastings sat to one side, his notebook open, his pencil poised to capture every word. Ms. Amos, Poirot began, his voice soft but carrying the weight of inevitability. We have reached a moment of truth. The death of Sir Reginald Ashburn is a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, have gathered its pieces. Tonight, we will see how they fit. But first, I must apply a little pressure to see who bends and who breaks. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn's hands tightened in her lap. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice icy. This is hardly the time for theatrics. If you have evidence, present it. Poirot's smile was faint but unyielding. Evidence, madam, oh, I have evidence. But evidence without understanding is like a map without a compass. Let us begin with the night of the murder. Sir Reginald was poisoned with cyanide, administered in his brandy glass between 9:30, when Grayson poured it, and 11 o'clock, when he was found dead. The door was locked, the key in his pocket, the window open but undisturbed. A perfect mystery. He paced, slowly, his eyes scanning each face. But perfection, it is an illusion. There are cracks. The cigarette case, for instance. He produced the silver case from his pocket, holding it aloft. Monsieur Charles, you claimed it was yours, left in the study days before. Yet Mademoiselle Fenton has admitted to taking it 2 days before the murder, to protect you from Sir Reginald's suspicions. Why, I wonder, was such protection needed? Charles's face reddened, his cigarette snapping in his fingers. I told you. It was nothing. Clara was being kind. That's all. I didn't kill my uncle. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, monsieur. I do not say you did. But your anger, it tells a story. You argued with Sir Reginald about money, about your debts, and the codicil. It favored you, did it not? A motive, perhaps. Mrs. Langley's voice cut in, sharp and accusing. If anyone had motive, it was you, Evelyn. Reginald was going to change the will, reduce my share. You knew it. And you were in the study last. Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed. Beatrice, that's absurd. I loved Reginald. I would never. Enough. Poirot's voice was like a whip, silencing the room. Accusations. They are easy. Truth. It is harder. Let us consider another clue. The cigarette stub, different from those in Charles's case, found in the study's ashtray. Who smoked it? Not Sir Reginald. Who despised the habit? Dr. Blake, perhaps. Your cigar. It left a similar scent in the billiard room. Blake's face paled, his spectacles slipping down his nose. I told you. I didn't go near the study after 10:45. That vial in my bag was planted. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Planted. You say, a convenient excuse. Yet the cyanide was in the brandy glass, not the decanter. Someone had access to that glass after 9:30. And then there is the clock 5 minutes slow. A small thing, but deliberate. Why? To confuse the time of death. To create an alibi? He turned to Clara, his voice softening. Mademoiselle Fenton, you heard a thud at 10:30. Above the study. You did not investigate, you say. But your fear, it speaks volumes. What did you fear to find? Clara's hands trembled, her voice barely a whisper. I was afraid for Charles. I thought he might have gone to the study, argued again. But I swear, I didn't know about the poison. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Mr. Reed. And you, Monsieur Reed, you hold the codicil, locked away, yet you have not shown it to us. Why? Does it reveal too much? Reed swallowed, his fingers twitching. It's sensitive. Sir Reginald asked me to keep it confidential until his affairs were settled. Confidential, Poirot echoed, his tone sharp. Yet a man is dead, and secrets are no longer a luxury. I will see that codicil, monsieur, tomorrow. He stepped back, his eyes sweeping the room. Each of you has a piece of this puzzle. A debt, a love, a grudge, a lie. But one of you has woven these pieces into murder. I, Hercule Poirot, will find you. Tomorrow, we will gather again, and I will lay bare the truth. Reflect, Ms. Amos, on what you have done and what you have hidden. The room erupted in protests, voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and denial. Charles stood, his fists clenched. Lady Evelyn's composure faltered, her eyes filling with tears. Mrs. Langley's handkerchief tore in her hands. Clara buried her face in her hands. Anne Blake's spectacles fell to the floor. Only Poirot remained calm, his expression serene but unyielding as the group dispersed. Hastings leaned close, his voice low. Poirot, you've rattled them all. Do you know who did it? That business with the clock and the stub-bit's brilliant, but I'm still in the dark. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The dark, Hastings? Non, we are approaching the light. The trap is set. Tomorrow, one of them will betray themselves not with words, but with actions. The little gray cells, they are almost ready. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows of Blackthorn Manor. The trap was indeed set, and the truth, like a cornered animal, was about to show its teeth. Chapter 10. The revealed drawing room of Blackthorn Manor was suffused with a heavy stillness, as though the very walls held their breath in anticipation. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting a pale glow over the assembled company, who sat in a tense semicircle around Hercule Poirot. His small, immaculate figure stood at the center, his patent leather shoes gleaming. his mustache a perfect curve of confidence. His green eyes, sharp and unrelenting, moved from face to face, taking in every flicker of emotion, fear, defiance, resignation. Captain Hastings sat to one side, his notebook filled with frantic scribbles, his heart pounding with the certainty that this was the moment of truth. Inspector Japp stood near the door, his arms crossed, his bulldog-like scowl softened by a grudging respect for Poirot's methods. The suspects Lady Evelyn Ashburn, Charles Ashburn, Clara Fenton, Dr. Mortimer Blake, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, and Mr. Percival Reed sat rigid, their faces a gallery of apprehension. Ms. Amos, Poirot began, his voice soft but resonant. We have come to the end of our puzzle. The death of Sir Reginald Ashburn was no accident, no impulse. It was a crime of precision, woven with care and cunning. I, Hercule Poirot, have unraveled its threads, and now I will lay bare the truth. A murmur of unease rippled through the room, quickly silenced as Poirot raised a hand. Let us begin with the facts. Sir Reginald was poisoned with cyanide, administered in his brandy glass between 9:30, when Grayson poured it, and 11 o'clock, when he was found dead. The door was locked, the key in his pocket, the window open but undisturbed. A perfect locked room. Mystery, none, but perfection. It is a lie. The truth lies in the details. He paced slowly, his eyes never leaving the group. First, the cigarette case. Monsieur Charles, you claimed it was yours, left in the study days before. Mademoiselle Fenton confessed to taking it, to protect you from Sir Reginald's suspicions of your liaison. Yet the cigarette stub in the ashtray was not from your case. It was different, a clue that pointed elsewhere. Charles's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot continued. Then, the clock 5 minutes slow. A small thing, but deliberate. Someone tampered with it, to confuse the timeline of death. And the open window, no footprints, no signs of entry. Yet it was open on a cool night. Why? He turned to Dr. Blake, whose spectacles glinted nervously. Doctor, the cyanide vial in your bag was a damning clue. To damning, perhaps. It was planted, as you claimed, to make you the obvious suspect. But by whom? Blake's face paled, his voice a croak. I told you. I had no part in this. Poirot's smile was faint but piercing. Patience, Doctor. We will come to you. He turned to Lady Evelyn. Madam, you were the last to see Sir Reginald alive, at 10:15. You spoke of family affairs, but you omitted the letter about his debt that weighed heavily on him. Why did you conceal it? Lady Evelyn's composure faltered, her hands trembling. It was private. It had nothing to do with his death. Raymond, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. And yet, the debt was a motive for someone. Let us consider the codicil, Monsieur Reed. You confirmed it increased Charles's inheritance and reduced Madame Langley's. A motive for her. Perhaps. Mrs. Langley's eyes flashed. I would never. Reginald was family. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Family, we. But family can betray. Let us reconstruct the night of the murder, step by step, with the little gray cells as our guide. He paused, letting the tension build. At 9:30, Grayson pours the brandy and leaves the study. Sir Reginald is alone. At 10:15, Lady Evelyn speaks with him, then departs. At 10:30, Mademoiselle Fenton hears a thud above the study, perhaps a chair falling, or a body. By 11 o'clock, Sir Reginald is dead, the glass poisoned, the door locked. But how was the cyanide delivered? He turned to the group. his voice rising. "The key lies in the window and the clock." The window was opened not for entry, but for air to disperse the faint almond-like smell of cyanide, which Grayson noted. The clock was slowed to suggest Sir Reginald died later, giving the murderer time to act. But the true genius was the method of poisoning. Poirot's eyes locked on Mrs. Beatrice Langley. "Madame Langley, you are the architect of this crime. You poisoned Sir Reginald, and I will tell you how." A gasp tore through the room. Mrs. Langley's face drained of color, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "This is outrageous," she cried. "You have no proof." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but relentless. "Proof, madam? I have the proof of logic. You were in the drawing room with Lady Evelyn until 10 o'clock, then retired. But you did not go to your room. You went to the study, using a duplicate key you had made months ago. When you managed the household accounts, you knew Sir Reginald's habits, his nightly brandy. You added cyanide to his glass not from a vial, but from a cigarette, laced with the poison." He held up the envelope containing the cigarette stub. "This stub, found in the ashtray, was yours. You smoked it to steady your nerves, but you left it behind a fatal mistake. The cyanide was concealed in the cigarette's paper, dissolved into the brandy when you dropped it in. A method so subtle it left no trace in the decanter." Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, her voice a hiss. "You're mad. Why would I do such a thing?" "Motive," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "The codicil. Sir Reginald planned to reduce your inheritance, leaving you with little. You, who had lived in this house for years, managing its affairs, felt betrayed. You saw Charles favored, a reckless spendthrift in your eyes, and the debt it threatened the estate, your security. You acted to protect your future, to ensure. The will was never changed." He turned to the others. "The thud Mademoiselle Fenton heard was you, Madame Langley, knocking over a chair as you left the study in haste. You slowed the clock to confuse the time of death, creating an alibi. You planted the vial in Dr. Blake's bag, knowing his medical access made him a perfect scapegoat. And the cigarette case, you placed it on the desk, hoping to implicate Charles. Further muddying the waters, double quotes." Mrs. Langley stood, her face contorted with fury. "This is nonsense. You can't prove any of it." Poirot's smile was cold. "But I can, madam. The stub has been tested. Its paper matches a rare brand you keep in your room, confirmed by the servants. The duplicate key, I found it this morning, hidden in your sewing box. And your handkerchief, torn last night, it bears traces of cyanide. From when you handled the cigarette." The room was silent, the weight of Poirot's words crushing. Mrs. Langley swayed, her defiance crumbling. I only wanted what was mine," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Reginald was going to ruin everything." Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Beatrice Langley, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn." As Japp led her away, the room erupted in murmurs. Clara buried her face in her hands, Charles staring after her in shock. Lady Evelyn's shoulders sagged, tears streaming down her face. Poirot stood unmoved, his expression serene. Hastings leaned close, his voice awed. "Poirot, how did you know?" "The cigarette, that was brilliant." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, Hastings. They see what others miss. The stub, the clock, the window, they told a story, and Madame Langley could not silence it." As the group dispersed, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. The truth had been revealed, as inevitable as the dawn, and Hercule Poirot stood at its heart, a master of logic and human nature. Chapter 11. The reflection they morning mist clung to the grounds of Blackthorn Manor, softening the edges of the rose gardens and shrouding the ancient oaks in a ghostly veil. Inside, the drawing room was quiet, its heavy curtains drawn back to admit the pale light of day. The air felt lighter now, as if the house itself had exhaled a long-held breath with the arrest of Mrs. Beatrice Langley. Yet a somber weight lingered, the aftermath of truth revealed. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed armchair, his small, immaculate figure a study in calm precision. His patent leather shoes gleamed. His mustache was perfectly symmetrical, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity, tempered by a flicker of melancholy. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook closed, his face etched with the exhaustion of a case resolved but not without cost. The remaining inhabitants of the manor, Lady Evelyn Ashburn, Charles Ashburn, Clara Fenton, Dr. Mortimer Blake, and Mr. Percival Reed, had dispersed to their rooms, grappling with the shock of Mrs. Langley's confession. Inspector Japp had left with his prisoner, promising to return later to tie up loose ends. For now, the room belonged to Poirot and Hastings. A moment of reflection amidst the storm's aftermath. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the window, "you did it again. The cigarette stub, the duplicate key, the handkerchief. It was like watching a magician pull back the curtain. But how did you know it was Mrs. Langley from the start?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat. "From the start, Hastings. Non. The little grey cells, they do not leap to conclusions. They observe, they ponder, they connect. Mrs. Langley was not my suspect until the pieces began to fit: the stub, the clock, the window, her torn handkerchief. Each was a thread, and together they wove her guilt." Hastings frowned, settling into a chair opposite Poirot. "But the cigarette stub, how did you know it was hers? And that cyanide trick, dissolving it in the brandy. It's diabolical." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "Diabolical, oui, but also precise. The stub was the key. When I saw it did not match Charles's case, I asked myself, who else smokes? The servants confirmed Madame Langley kept a rare brand, imported from Paris, stored in her room. The stubs, paper matched perfectly. As for the cyanide, it was a method of cunning simplicity. A cigarette laced with poison, dropped into the brandy, would dissolve slowly, leaving no trace in the decanter. She knew Sir Reginald's habits, his nightly ritual. She planned it with care." Hastings shook his head, marveling. "And the clock, slowing it by 5 minutes to confuse the timeline. A small but vital deception," Poirot said. "It suggested Sir Reginald died later, giving her time to return to her room and establish an alibi. The open window dispersed the cyanide's telltale almond scent, which Grayson noted but dismissed, and the duplicate key hidden in her sewing box. A place no one would think to look was her means to enter and leave unnoticed." Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "But her motive, Poirot the codicil, it seems so cold. To kill her own brother-in-law over money." Poirot's expression softened, a trace of sadness in his eyes. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a complex thing. Madame Langley saw herself as the guardian of this house, its legacy tied to her late sister's memory. When Sir Reginald planned to reduce her inheritance, favoring Charles, she felt betrayed not just for herself, but for the past she clung to. Money, it was the spark, but pride and fear fanned the flame. She acted to preserve her place, her power. In her mind, it was justice." Hastings sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And Clara, poor girl, caught up in all this, protecting Charles. Do you think she'll be all right? Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the mist was beginning to lift. Mademoiselle Fenton is young, Hastings, and her heart is bruised but strong. Her love for Charles, it clouded her judgment, but it also gave her courage to speak. She will heal in time. As for Charles, he must face his own recklessness, his debts, his secrets. But that is a matter for another day. He rose, adjusting his lapels with meticulous care. This case, Hastings, it reminds us of the fragility of trust. In a house like this, where wealth and status reign, the heart can turn to stone. Yet, it is also a reminder that the truth, it always finds a way. The little gray cells, they see through the shadows. Hastings smiled, a touch of awe in his voice. You make it sound almost poetic, Poirot. But what now? The case is solved. Mrs. Langley is in custody. Do we just leave? Poirot's eyes twinkled, a hint of mischief returning. Leave? We, soon. But first, I must ensure Monsieur Reed delivers the codicil to the authorities. It will confirm Sir Reginald's intentions, and perhaps bring peace to this troubled house. And then, mon ami, a cup of tisane, a quiet train ride, and the comfort of order restored. He moved to the door, pausing to cast a final glance around the room. Blackthorn Manor. It will recover, as all things do. But it will not forget, nor will we. As they stepped into the hall, the manor seemed to sigh, its secrets laid bare, its wounds exposed to the healing light of truth. Poirot walked with his usual brisk step, his mind already turning to the next challenge, while Hastings followed, marveling at the man who could unravel the darkest of human mysteries with nothing but logic and a touch of genius. Outside, the mist parted, revealing a sky of pale blue. The world moved on, and Hercule Poirot, ever the sentinel of truth, moved with it, ready for whatever puzzle awaited. Chapter 12. The aftermath. Late morning sun bathed Blackthorn Manor in a gentle glow, its rays piercing the last wisps of mist that clung to the estate's sprawling lawns. Inside, the grand hall was quiet, save for the soft creak of floorboards underfoot and the distant clatter of servants preparing the house for a new day. The weight of Mrs. Beatrice Langley's arrest hung over the manor like a fading storm, leaving behind a fragile calm. Hercule Poirot stood by the grand staircase, his small, immaculate figure as composed as ever, his green eyes scanning the hall with a mixture of satisfaction and quiet contemplation. Captain Hastings emerged from the dining room, a cup of tea in hand, his face still marked by the intensity of the previous day's revelations. Poirot, he said, joining his friend, the house feels different now, lighter, somehow, but sad. Do you think they'll ever recover from this? Poirot's mustache twitched, his hands clasped behind his back. Recover, Hastings. We, in time, the human spirit. It is resilient, even when wounded by betrayal. But Blackthorn Manor will carry the scars of this crime, as all places do when trust is broken. They walked toward the study, where the door stood slightly ajar, a silent reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the threshold. Come, Hastings, let us ensure all is in order before we depart. There are loose ends, and Hercule Poirot does not leave a case unfinished. Inside the study, the air was cool, the faint, almond-like scent now gone, replaced by the familiar mustiness of old books and polished wood. The desk, once the scene of Sir Reginald's death, was tidy, its papers neatly stacked by the solicitor, Mr. Percival Reed. who had arrived earlier to deliver the codicil to Inspector Japp. Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers brushing the edge of the blotter, as if testing its secrets one last time. "Hastings," he said, his voice low. The codicil was the spark that ignited this tragedy. Madame Langley's fear of losing her place, her power, drove her to murder. Yet I cannot help but wonder, was there another way? Could understanding have prevented such an act? Hastings frowned, setting his teacup on a side table. "You're not blaming yourself, are you, Poirot? You solved the case. You found the truth. That's what matters." Poirot's smile was faint, tinged with melancholy. "The truth, it is my purpose. But the cost, Hastings, it is always the cost that lingers." Madame Langley was not a monster, but a woman consumed by fear and pride. And the others, Lady Evelyn, Charles, Clara, they must now live with the wreckage of her actions. A soft knock interrupted them. Clara Fenton stood in the doorway, her face pale but composed, her hands clasped before her. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the shadows under her eyes, "I wanted to thank you for finding the truth. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Poirot inclined his head, his expression gentle. "Mademoiselle, you showed courage in speaking of your fears, your love for Monsieur Charles. That courage helped uncover the truth. You have nothing to reproach yourself for." Clara's lips trembled, but she managed a small smile. "I'm leaving Blackthorn Manor. Thomas needs a fresh start, and so do I, Charles. He's asked me to stay, but I need time to think, to heal." Poirot nodded, his eyes warm. "A wise choice, Mademoiselle. The heart, it must find its own path. I wish you strength." As Clara left, Hastings watched her go, his expression thoughtful. "She's stronger than she looks, Poirot. But what about Charles and Lady Evelyn? This whole affair has torn them apart." Poirot said, moving to the window, where the gardens stretched out in orderly rows. "Lady Evelyn will mourn, but she is resilient. She will rebuild, perhaps with a clearer heart. Charles, he must face his debts, his recklessness. But love, Hastings, it can be a powerful force for change, if he chooses it." They were joined by Mr. Reed, who entered clutching a leather portfolio. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice nervous, "the codicil has been delivered to the authorities. It confirms Sir Reginald's intent to increase Charles's inheritance and reduce Mrs. Langley's. The estate will proceed accordingly, though it's a tangled mess with the debts." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Monsieur Reed. You have done your duty. The truth, it is now in the hands of justice." Reed hesitated, then added, "There's one thing more. Sir Reginald left a letter, not the one about the debt, but a personal one for Lady Evelyn. It was in the codicil's envelope. I thought you should know." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A letter, and its contents. It speaks of his love for her," Reed said quietly, "and his regret for the burdens he placed on her, the debt, the estate's troubles. He asked her forgiveness." Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "A final gift, perhaps. Deliver it to her, monsieur. It may bring her peace." As Reed left, Hastings sighed. Poor Lady Evelyn, to lose her husband, then learn of his regrets. It's a lot to bear. "Indeed," Poirot said, his voice soft, "but the truth, even when painful, can be a balm. She will carry on, as they all must." They stepped into the hall, where the servants bustled quietly, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the manor one last time. This house, Hastings, it has seen much, but it will endure. And we move on to the next puzzle, the next truth. Hastings smiled, a touch of admiration in his eyes. You never stop, do you, Poirot? Always chasing the next mystery? Poirot's mustache twitched, a spark of mischief returning. The little grey cells. Mon ami, they do not rest. Come, the train awaits, and I have a craving for a proper tisane. As they left Blackthorn Manor, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the mist. The estate stood silent, its secrets exposed, its future uncertain but hopeful. Hercule Poirot walked with his usual brisk step, his mind already turning to the next challenge, the next truth waiting to be uncovered in the intricate tapestry of human nature. Chapter 13. The unraveling threads. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel drive of Blackthorn Manor, its golden rays glinting off the windows as if to coax the last of the house's secrets into the open. Inside, the library was a sanctuary of quiet, its shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes that seemed to absorb the day's warmth. Hercule Poirot stood near a tall bookcase, his small, precise figure framed by the soft light filtering through the leaded panes. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mustache impeccable, his green eyes sharp with the clarity of a case nearly closed. Captain Hastings sat at a reading table, his notebook open but untouched, his gaze fixed on Poirot. The weight of the previous day's revelations, Mrs. Beatrice Langley's arrest, Clara Fenton's departure, and the codicil's confirmation hung between them like a fading echo. Yet Hastings sensed that Poirot's mind was not entirely at rest. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence, the case is solved, isn't it? Mrs. Langley confessed, the evidence is airtight. Why do you look as though there's something more? Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Mon cher Hastings, you are perceptive. As always. The case. It is solved. Madam Langley is guilty of Sir Reginald's murder. The cigarette stub, the duplicate key, the tampered clock, these are the pillars of her guilt. Yet the little grey cells, they whisper of loose threads, small inconsistencies that must be tied before we depart. Hastings frowned, leaning forward. Inconsistencies? What do you mean? She admitted to it. Poirot. The cyanide in the cigarette. The motive with the codicil, it all fits. Poirot raised a finger, his voice soft but firm. It fits. But the picture is not complete. There is a detail, a small one. Perhaps that troubles me. The letter about Sir Reginald's debt. The one Lady Evelyn concealed. Why was it so important to her? And why, Hastings, did Monsieur Reed hesitate when I asked to see the codicil itself? Hastings's eyes widened. You think there's more to the codicil? Or the debt? But how could that change things now? Poirot moved to the window, his gaze drifting to the gardens beyond. The debt. It was a shadow over Sir Reginald's life, a burden he hid from most. Lady Evelyn knew of it, yet she spoke of it only vaguely. I wonder, was there another secret tied to it? A secret that Madame Langley, in her desperation, did not know. Before Hastings could respond, the door creaked open, and Lady Evelyn entered, her morning dress a stark contrast to her pale, composed face. Her eyes, though red-rimmed, held a quiet resolve. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady, I heard you were still here. I wanted to speak with you. Alone, if possible. Poirot inclined his head, gesturing to a chair. Madam, please, sit. Captain Hastings, he is my trusted friend, but if you prefer privacy, he will step outside. Hastings rose, but Lady Evelyn shook her head. No, it's all right. He may stay. This concerns the truth, and I've hidden it long enough. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. The truth, madam, speak, and let Hercule Poirot listen. Lady Evelyn took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly. The letter you found, the one about Reginald's debt. It wasn't just a debt to a London creditor. It was personal. Reginald borrowed money years ago from a man named Victor Grayson. Hastings gasped. Grayson, the butler. Lady Evelyn nodded, her voice low. Yes, Victor's father, a former business partner of Reginald's, lent him a substantial sum during a financial crisis. When Victor's father died, the debt passed to him. Reginald was repaying it slowly, but Victor, he grew impatient. He threatened to expose the debt, to ruin Reginald's reputation. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. And you kept this secret, madam? Why? Because, Lady Evelyn said, her voice breaking, Victor was loyal to Reginald. In his own way, he stayed on as butler, not just for the salary, but to ensure the debt was paid. I thought if I told you, it would complicate things, make Victor a suspect. But he didn't kill Reginald. He had no need to. Reginald was paying him. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. And yet, madam, you did not tell me this when I asked about the letter. Why the silence? If Victor is innocent, Lady Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Because I was ashamed. Reginald's pride, his secrecy, it was tearing us apart. I didn't want the world to know how desperate we were. And Beatrice, she knew about the debt, too. She used it to manipulate Reginald, to keep her influence over the estate. I think that's why he changed the codicil to limit her power. Poirot nodded slowly, his mind racing. Merci, madam. Your candor, it is a gift to the truth. This debt, it adds a layer to Madame Langley's motive. She feared not just the loss of her inheritance, but the exposure of the estate's fragility. Hastings scribbled furiously, his voice urgent. Poirot, does this mean Grayson could have been involved? He had access to the study, the brandy. Hastings, Poirot said, raising a hand. Victor Grayson had motive, but no opportunity. He was in the servants' hall from 10 o'clock onward, as confirmed by the staff. The cyanide, the stub, the key, these point only to Madame Langley. But this debt, it explains her desperation, her fear that the estate would collapse. Lady Evelyn rose, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Monsieur Poirot. I thought I was protecting Reginald's memory. But you've given us justice. Thank you. As she left, Hastings turned to Poirot, his eyes wide. Good Lord, Poirot. That debt, it's a whole new angle. Does it change anything? Poirot's smile was faint but satisfied. It changes nothing, Hastings, but it completes the picture. Madame Langley's crime was not just about money, but about control, about preserving a world she believed was hers. The debt, it was the spark that lit her fear. Now, the puzzle is whole. He moved to the door, his step brisk. Come, Hastings. We must speak to Monsieur Reed once more, to ensure the codicil is filed correctly. Then we depart. The truth is settled, and Blackthorn Manor must find its own path. As they left the library, the manor seemed to hum with a quiet resilience, its secrets now fully exposed. The threads of the mystery debt, betrayal, love, and pride had been unraveled, leaving only the promise of healing in their wake. Poirot's mind, ever restless, turned to the horizon, where new puzzles awaited. Chapter 14. The final pieces. Late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue over Blackthorn Manor's sprawling estate, softening the stark lines of its stone facade. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and the promise of closure. Inside, the grand hall echoed with the quiet bustle of servants preparing for the evening, their movements subdued by the weight of recent events. Hercule Poirot stood near the foot of the grand staircase, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of order amidst the lingering chaos. His patent leather shoes gleamed. His mustache was a perfect crescent, and his green eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of a case resolved yet tinged with a trace of curiosity. As if one final piece remained, Captain Hastings emerged from the drawing-room, his overcoat draped over one arm, a small valise in hand. His face bore the weariness of a man who had seen too much of human frailty, but his eyes lit up as he spotted Poirot. "Well, Poirot," he said, setting his valise down, "it's nearly time to go. The train leaves in an hour. But you've got that look again, like there's something you haven't told me." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Mon cher Hastings, you know me too well. The case, it is solved. Madame Langley's guilt is certain, her motive clear. Yet there's one small matter, a final thread, that I must address before we leave Blackthorn Manor. It concerns Monsieur Reed and the codicil." Hastings's brow furrowed. "The codicil? But it's been delivered to the authorities, you said." "It confirmed everything: Charles's increased inheritance, Mrs. Langley's reduced share. What's left to question?" Poirot raised a finger, his voice soft but precise. "The little grey cells, Hastings. They are restless. Monsieur Reed was evasive when I asked to see the codicil itself. He spoke of its contents, but he did not show it to me. Why? In a case of murder, every document, every word, must be examined with care." They made their way to the library, where Mr. Percival Reed sat at a writing desk, surrounded by ledgers and papers. His spectacles perched precariously on his nose, and his fingers twitched as he sorted through documents. He looked up, startled, as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Monsieur Poirot," Reed said, his voice nervous, "I wasn't expecting you. The codicil is with the authorities, as I told you. Everything is in order." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his tone gentle but unyielding. "In order, monsieur. Perhaps, but I, Hercule Poirot, prefer to see things with my own eyes. You will forgive me, but I must insist on examining the codicil or a copy, if the original is gone. It is a small request." Reed's face paled, his hands fumbling with a ledger. I don't have a copy here. It's all with the police now." "Surely you trust Inspector Japp's handling of it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a spark of suspicion in his gaze. "Trust, monsieur, is earned. And your hesitation, it intrigues me. Tell me, what is in the codicil that you fear to reveal? A detail, perhaps, that changes the shape of this tragedy." Reed swallowed, his eyes darting to the door. "There's nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot. The codicil is as I described, sir. Reginald increased Charles's share and reduced Mrs. Langley's. It's straightforward." "Straightforward?" Poirot's voice was soft but piercing. "Then why, monsieur, did the servants overhear you speaking with Sir Reginald the day before his death, in heated tones, about changes that troubled you? What were these changes?" Reed's hands trembled, and he pushed his spectacles up his nose. "It was a professional disagreement. Sir Reginald was under strain, making rash decisions. I advised caution. That's all." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes locked on Reed's. "Caution or concealment? I have learned, monsieur, that you have managed Sir Reginald's legal affairs. 4 years. You knew of his debt to Victor Grayson's father, did you not? And you knew that the codicil included a provision, a small one, perhaps for Grayson, to settle the debt in full. Why did you not mention this? Reed's face crumpled, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't think it mattered. The debt was a private matter, settled in the codicil. I didn't want to complicate things. Not with Mrs. Langley's arrest. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Complicate, monsieur? Or protect? You feared that revealing the provision for Grayson would cast suspicion on him, or perhaps on yourself. You have handled the estate's finances. A man in your position, might fear scrutiny. If the debt's exposure threatened your reputation. Reed slumped in his chair, his hands covering his face. I meant no harm, Monsieur Poirot. I only wanted to protect the family's dignity. The debt was a stain on Sir Reginald's name. I thought it best to keep it quiet. Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. The truth, monsieur. It is never served by silence. But I believe you acted out of loyalty, not malice. The codicil's provision for Grayson. It confirms Lady Evelyn's story and completes the motive for Madame Langley. She feared not only the loss of her inheritance, but the collapse of the estate under the weight of that. Yet, Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. So, the codicil included a payment to Grayson. That's what you were chasing, Poirot. It doesn't change Mrs. Langley's guilt, does it? Non. Hastings, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. It does not change her guilt, but it completes the picture. Madame Langley's fear was not just of losing money, but of losing control over a house teetering on ruin. The debt, the codicil, the secrets they drove her to murder. Now, all is clear. He turned to Reed, his tone brisk. Monsieur, you will provide a copy of the codicil to Inspector Japp, with all its provisions, including the payment to Grayson. The truth must be whole, or it is nothing. Reed nodded, his voice subdued. I will, Monsieur Poirot. I'm sorry for my hesitation. As they left the library, Hastings shook his head, a wry smile on his lips. You never miss a thing, do you, Poirot? Even when the case is solved, you find one last thread to pull. Poirot's smile was serene. The little gray cells, Hastings, they demand order, precision. A single loose thread. It can unravel the tapestry of truth. Now, it is done. They stepped into the hall, where the servants moved quietly, their faces a mix of relief and lingering sorrow. The manor stood as a silent witness to its own tragedy, its walls holding the echoes of secrets now laid bare. Poirot adjusted his hat, his step light, as if the weight of the case had finally lifted. Come, Hastings, he said, his voice bright. The train awaits, and I dream of a tizen in the peace of London. The world, it has many puzzles, and we must be ready for the next. As they walked down the gravel drive, the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to bid farewell to Blackthorn Manor. The case was closed, the truth revealed, and Hercule Poirot moved on, his mind ever alert for the next mystery waiting in the wings. Chapter 15. The departure. The sun hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its golden light softening the estate's stern stone walls and gilding the gravel drive, where a motor car waited. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of a rook. Inside the grand hall, the atmosphere was one of quiet resolution, as if the house itself had settled into a new rhythm after the storm of murder and revelation. Hercule Poirot stood near the entrance, his small, immaculate figure a picture of composure. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache was a perfect crescent, and his green eyes held a serene satisfaction, tempered by the wisdom of one who had seen the depths of human nature. Captain Hastings stood beside him, his valise packed, his overcoat draped over one arm. His face bore the traces of exhaustion, but his eyes sparkled with admiration for his friend. "Well, Poirot," he said, adjusting his hat, "it's over. Mrs. Langley's in custody. The codicil's with the authorities, and the truth about the dead is out. You've tied up every loose end, as always." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, contented smile. "Every end, Hastings. Perhaps. The little grey cells. They have worked hard to bring order to this chaos. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashburn was a puzzle of many pieces: cigarette stubs, tampered clocks, hidden keys, and buried debts. Yet it was the human heart, with its fears and desires, that held the key. They stepped outside, where the motor car's engine purred softly, ready to take them to the station. The Manor's staff lined the drive, their faces a mix of gratitude and lingering sorrow. Grayson, the butler, stood at the forefront, his posture rigid but his eyes warm with respect. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, bowing slightly, "we owe you a great debt. You've brought justice to this house." Poirot inclined his head, his voice gentle. "Monsieur Grayson, justice is its own reward. Your loyalty to Sir Reginald, despite the burden of his debt to your family, speaks of honor. I trust you will guide this household through its healing." Grayson nodded, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. "I'll do my best, sir." As they walked toward the car, Lady Evelyn appeared at the Manor's entrance, her mourning dress stark against the pale stone. She approached Poirot, her composure fragile but intact, a sealed envelope in her hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "this is the letter Reginald wrote to me. The one Mr. Reed found with the codicil. I've read it. He asked for my forgiveness, for the secrets he kept. I wanted to thank you for giving me that, and for finding the truth." Poirot took her hand, his touch light but reassuring. "Madam, the truth is a gift, even when it pains. Sir Reginald loved you, and his letter, it is a testament to that love. Carry it with you, and let it bring you peace." Lady Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she managed a small smile. "I will. Safe travels, Monsieur Poirot." As she returned to the Manor, Hastings climbed into the car, glancing back at the house. "It's strange, Poirot," he said, settling into the seat, "to think of this place going on without Sir Reginald, without Mrs. Langley, Charles and Clara. Do you think they'll find their way?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression thoughtful. "Monsieur Charles. He has much to learn about responsibility, about love. Mademoiselle Fenton, she has chosen her own path, and that is wise. The heart, Hastings, it heals in its own time. Blackthorn Manor will endure, as it always has, with new stories to tell." The car rolled down the drive, the Manor shrinking in the distance, its towers framed against the fading light. Hastings leaned back, his voice soft. "You know, Poirot, I thought I'd seen it all with you. But this case, the cyanide in the cigarette, the duplicate key, the debt it's won for the books. How do you do it? How do you see what no one else does?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of mischief in his smile. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They observe, they connect, they demand order. The human soul, it is complex, but it leaves traces, clues in a glance, a word, a silence. I, Hercule Poirot, merely follow those traces to their end." The car reached the station, where the train to London waited, its steam curling into the evening air. Poirot stepped out, his step brisk, his mind already turning to the comforts of home. "A tisn, Hastings," he said, his voice bright, "and perhaps a quiet evening to restore the balance. The world, it is full of puzzles, and we must be ready for the next." Hastings laughed, following him to the platform. "You're insatiable, Poirot, but I wouldn't have it any other way." As the train pulled away, Blackthorn Manor faded into the twilight, its secrets laid bare, its future uncertain but hopeful. Hercule Poirot gazed out the window, his mind a whirl of logic and intuition, ever ready for the next mystery that would challenge the little gray cells. The world turned, and the great detective moved with it, a sentinel of truth in a landscape of shadows.